The role of savings and capital investment. So the overall question is, how does saving increase the overall wealth of an economy? Now, this is not talking about the sense of just telling somebody you ought to save more money, though that may be true. That's more of a personal finance question. This is how an economy grows. There's only one known way for an economy to grow past extreme poverty, which was the norm of all human history until the last 200 years. There is only one possible way to move beyond that basic subsistence level where all that is produced is consumed, and that is through savings, capital accumulation, capital investment. And that is the only known way to grow an economy and have economic prosperity and more material well-being. This graph is the GDP of the all world history. This is all economic history on one graph. It can be explained very simply. The tale of economic history of the human world is this, for the most part. Once people were very poor, $3 a day or less, and that was the norm of all human history until this point in 1800. And then there is a radical change that leads to now people are very rich. And this comes from research that can demonstrate this on every possible measure. And this is not limited just to the Western world. This is globally. Now, it's not spread evenly, and it applies in some places where the conditions are have either done this longer or are more favorable to this type of thing, but this is worldwide. One thing most people probably don't know, but this is a very good thing, a reality of the world, is that global poverty in the last 50 years has been halved, has been cut in half, meaning the people who are living at that subsistence level, $3 a day or less, is decreasing as wealth increases globally and poverty begins to disappear. And so we see that these measures, everything indicates that it's all moving forward. Now, there are some places that are different than others in regard to this, but that is the basic story. Everybody lived in human history in extreme poverty, in conditions of near starvation, just like slavery was normal, just like child labor was normal. Poverty was normal all throughout this time period until 1800, especially for average people. Even the wealthiest people, if you look back into 1500, yes, they had wealth of kings and royals, and they may have had servants or slaves or palaces and these different things, but the amount of wealth that they had during that time does not even compare in certain ways to the wealth of today in things like electricity and refrigerators and access to clean drinking water. And so the kings, the wealthiest people in human history, pale in comparison to the wealth that is available today to the average person in the modern world. And thus, the difference between the rich and the poor has shrunk down dramatically. Whether or not people believe that to be true or even want that to be true, it is the reality of the modern world, especially places like today, where in the United States, where people are living on $130 a day. Solomon, the biblical king, was very wealthy, had all kinds of trade, dominant nation politically, dominant nation militarily, trade with all these nations of the world, all kinds of animals, gold, silver. It was said that he was so wealthy because he could have ice delivered to him for drinking. But you think today, ice is not considered, in most cases, a luxury, but it is a normal good for the average person. It's not just something rich people have. Refrigerators, in pretty much every household, they're not just the playthings of the rich. Cars, vehicles, these are electricity, lighting. These are things that the modern world has for the average person living at the standard of $130 a day. Now, why is it possible to live this way now? Well, there's some explanations. One is exploitation. We're rich because others are poor. This is more of a leftist or Marxist analysis, that it comes from exploitation of others that causes this wealth. However, exploitation has existed forever and has never produced this unprecedented wealth. You think of slavery, you think of the stealing of resources from others, you think of the forcing people into trade by coercion. These is called crony capitalism or corporatism or capitalism, as it were. It can't produce that level of wealth. It never has, and it's not the right explanation now. Nor is it just investment, though that's part of it. Just investing and piling up resources can't do this. But there's a change in economic freedom and social honor in 1600, 1700 Holland and England. This change of worldview that came to honor the average person and what they were doing because of largely the Protestant Reformation, seeing not just the holy callings of the church as honorable or political work as honorable, but the average person finding honor in what they were doing. And an expansion of economic freedom allowed for this condition in which saving could take place. Imagine if you get $1, spend $1 every day. You get $1 and then you spend it. There is no forward movement. There is no progression unless something is saved and then rededicated to something in the future. It's sacrifice savings in the present that lead to more savings, more productivity, more efficiency, and more material well-being and economic prosperity in the future. This is what is called capital investment. It is investment in what are called capital goods. Now, you and I, as average people, don't necessarily think in terms of capital goods or invest in capital goods. We buy or invest in consumer goods. Consumer goods are those items that we purchase for ourselves: shirts, shoes, toothpaste, Frisbees, food, cars, iPhones, all these things that we purchase for ourselves in order to have them and use them. And that's perfectly good and right and acceptable, and that's fine. But capital goods are items used to produce other things. It's the stuff that makes stuff. It's the items that help something else to be produced. And the people who invest in capital goods are people who have saved and invest and see some sort of potential of doing something more productively, sacrificing to invest in that item in the present in order to enjoy the rewards of that thing in the future. And so this starts to happen in the Industrial Revolution, more particularly, that people start to invest in machines and factories and items that help them produce other things. Now, there's a lot of sadness associated with the Industrial Revolution, and you have to think about the conditions that people were leaving to choose to work in these factories and these bad conditions in which you could make more money. If the options are starvation, prostitution or slavery, dangerous farm work where you make far less money or far less productive, or starvation, then working in a factory in bad conditions in which you may be mistreated, which that's never right, but allows for an opportunity that would not otherwise be there. And that's why many people chose it. There was a major shift in the world from most people being farmers to people leaving agriculture for working in other sectors of the economy. Now, these factories, they do not pay people in the goods that they're creating. This was what Karl Marx complaint was, that the person is detached from the fruit of their labor, meaning if they're, this would be a modern example, if you're in a car factory, you don't get paid with cars at the end of the day. That being said, the worker signs up for, contracts for something that they want. What they're wanting as a worker and what we want as workers is cash up front. We don't want the final product of our labor. We would trade that for cash up front. And so the worker gets what they want in that short run view. They want the cash up front so that they can purchase other things. The investor, the person doing capital investment, the factory owner or the investors in it who have accumulated and now invest in these capital goods, they do not get paid until later. They only get paid if people purchase the product or service, and they only make money if they cover all their costs and have money left over. So there's this element of risk. Now, it can pay off majorly in the future, but having to sacrifice in the short run, giving that guaranteed pay, the input costs, and having to wait until people buy it or not are the risks that people take on for a potentially greater reward in the future. In that process, people are benefited by working, even if they say the conditions are bad or whatever the case may be, and they may very well be. But people look at their alternatives, they choose only that which is advantageous to themselves, and they are paid in the short run in cash up front. They are advantaging from this, and as there's more investment poured into this, it makes the worker more productive and allows the wages of the worker to increase and rise. This is also what brought child labor to an end, not just by legislation. Legislation would not take away the conditions of poverty, but as parents began to work, become more productive, and their wages increase through this process, child labor virtually begins to go away during this period. Slavery goes away during this period. Chattel slavery in that sense. Not that those conditions don't exist still in other places in the world, but it was through these conditions, through this change in human history that produced this prosperity, that those other factors began to become a thing of the past. It also allowed for an extreme division of labor in which goods and parts of goods and all the parts of items were spread out. Everybody did one little part and did whatever they did best based on their comparative advantage. And therefore, as a video that I show is a guy who tries to build a toaster from beginning to end, and it's impossible. It takes him thousands of dollars, months of time, and then he's having to mine iron, he's having to mine copper, he's having to try to come up with plastic, doing this stuff in his backyard, putting it all together, and then the toaster doesn't even really work. Then why do we have them if they're such a common household item? If they're so complicated, how is it possible we have these items? Well, it's because of capital investment, the ideas, economic freedom, social honor, and now a division of labor. The miners mining the iron, that some of which may become part of a toaster, they're not thinking about toasters, they're thinking about working for their wages. And then in the market, if there's a market demand for toasters, people fill that demand in hopes that they will make a profit. And so the division of labor spreads out the knowledge and the jobs and the tasks into much smaller bits and pieces, and then through people's free association with one another, these goods get produced that would otherwise be impossible, like the pencil, like the toaster, like the cell phone. And this is the key to understanding the modern world. This is the key to understanding, though economics is not political, it is a value-free science. It doesn't tell you whether you should or ought to do anything, but it does describe actions and the consequences of those actions. And if we believe human flourishing and economic prosperity and material well-being to be a good thing, that it's better for people to be prosperous and wealthy than poor and near starvation, then we ought to know that the only way to guarantee that in history, in economics, is through this process of saving and capital investment. And so other ways to try to achieve this, think of George W. Bush after 9/11 says, go out and shop. Now, that's going to stimulate certain sectors of the economy, or people who say that World War II got us out of the Depression because it was a bunch of government spending. Well, how could that possibly be true? Spending on things like bullets and ships and stuff that are going to go be used or get destroyed or possibly sink, that's just consumption. That may stimulate certain sectors of the economy, and sending working age men out of the country in a draft, that doesn't lead to economic prosperity. Spending, consumption does not guarantee economic prosperity. We know this. If all we did as an economy was go out and consume, no saving, no investment, this would cause what is called destructionism, which would take apart and take apart an economy and take us back to that level of extreme poverty, because all that would be there would be consumption. No, it is only saving, it is only investment that by whoever's doing it, the investment and savings of some, and then capital investment becomes the process through which the economy grows for everyone. So it doesn't necessarily take everyone to even engage in this process. And so this is the key to the growth of an economy. And I'm going to end this particular video there. There is more to say and more examples of this, but this introduces the foundational economic principles that lay down the other particular examples that we can explore at a later time.